Hi fam, it's Dylan's mum Deborah. This is Dylan Friends.
Oh my God, we've killed Michael Jordan's dad.
I won the first Brownlow. The problem with that was I wanted it again.
Hey, Jared, delete the tweet.
No, we're not here to break news.
This is an exclusive.
It's so silly looking back on for me because I remember just feeling like I'm not needed.
I couldn't, in my wildest of dreams, imagine that we would win the flag at the end of the year.
Damo's a lot funnier than people give him credit for.
Hugely funny.
But Andrew, a little message came across his phone and it was, give Job his Brownlow back.
Kingers, how are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
Mate, rise against the machine.
No. Rise against.
Oh, is that?
Rise against.
Oh, sorry. She's already stuffed it up. I knew early days, especially, all you wear is band tees and you're a heavy metal lover.
I am. This isn't quite heavy metal. Rise against. It's punk. But
It's punk. So you're just into the rock. You're just into rock.
I do enjoy. Oh, well, I like a variety of music.
Yeah.
Country, heavy metal.
Give us some of your, like, who's your top three? If you were on Spotify Wrapped, like, who's coming up the top?
Megadeth. Have you listened
I
to
can't
Megadeth?
say I've heard
Well,
too
why
much.
are you laughing
No,
then?
I don't know. Not sure.
I like Rise Against.
Yeah.
They're great. Maybe Guns N' Roses, someone like that.
Okay. Have you been to any concerts?
Oh,
yeah.
heaps.
Travelled.
I haven't travelled. Had the opportunity to go see Rise Against last year in Austin, but I was a little bit busy, so I didn't take it.
Yeah.
But no, normally either in Melbourne or Sydney.
Has it always been something you've like been in, like even playing days, growing up, everything? Music,
Yeah, love music. It's a release for me. If I've had a stressful day or I'm fatigued or whatever, I just really enjoy jumping in the car, turning the music on, and just switching off for a little while on the drive home or the drive to work. Typically, I listen to something, and then you pick different bands up and get a bit of information, and you start listening and expand your taste.
How do the boys go with that? And does it get a run in the gym, or is it?
No, I stay well away from the from the speaker. They're not. Only Keefe's into my sort of music, actually.
You reckon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I steer clear of the speaker.
Knowing Keefe and the suck up that he is, I genuinely reckon he's never heard. I reckon he thought it was Rise Against the Machine too, and he's just doing it to still get a game.
Well,
so,
maybe it's working for him at the moment.
Mate, so pumped to get you on the pod today. I've heard nothing but incredible things from a lot of the boys at at the Giants and people that have worked with you before. But there's also a part too where people say, he's pretty dry. Might not be able to crack him. He's a stern man, and he's no bullshit. You know what you see is what you get. So, how would you describe yourself as a coach, and then I suppose as a person as well?
Probably the person and the coach are the same thing. I think people might argue that, but I mean, I have high expectations of people. Particularly when they're as talented as, say, our players are. And so I have high expectations of them, but I think I'm quite fair in the way that I deal with those guys and expect. I am an honest person. I don't bullshit. I don't think that gets you anywhere. It certainly doesn't help our players if they're unaware of exactly where they stand. So I like to be honest, but I also like to be as positive as I possibly can. I think that gets the best results out of people, and it's a bit more fun and an environment you want to be a part of. So I like to be that person, although that's probably not as natural to me as what it what it might seem.
The positive,
I'm naturally a little bit pessimistic, I think, but. You've got to be the best version of yourself, and I'm still trying to be that. And I think our players enjoy the positivity. They enjoy the honesty, certainly. And that's who I try to be every time I talk to people or interact with our players.
I think it's a great explanation. It's something that I think being a player just in any sport, and I think anyone in business, anything, all you want from a leader is honesty. Like at the end of the day, and I think the relationships thing, talking to so many coaches has been amazing through this series, but the relationship thing, it bugs me sometimes because the way you build relationships is through honesty. And, I'm sure as much as you the players love you and you love them. It's not the relationship at this stage where you go and have beers on the weekend. That's the relationship of coming and getting feedback and being the person that's there for them. So
yeah, and I think there's the coach element to it, but there's also the human aspect to it with the relationship piece with the players particularly. And so I'm always I really enjoy spending time with our players. I can go and have a beer with them if I choose to. I can go and have a coffee with them. We don't always talk about football, and I think that's really important. We talk about at our club, and I think most clubs would talk about this, if not all of them, would be develop the person, develop the player in that order. At our footy club, we talk about striving to be champions and gentlemen, and that's more than just being footballers. And so I really like to push that side of the relationship with our players. And I think if you have that relationship where, like, I feel like my players know that I care about them and that, I'll work as hard as I possibly can to turn them into great people and great footballers, I think that builds a respect and, typically that helps our relationship with, and that maybe that's visible with the way they play, the way they act. I'm not sure, but I think we have a really strong relationship.
has that been an evolution of Kingsley? Like, is that like when you were a player, because you were Eastern, you went to Essendon, VFL, into Port?
Yep.
Do you reckon you've changed at all, or do you reckon you've sort of kept the same?
I'm probably just a little bit more aware.
Yeah.
As a player, I was just tell me what to do. Don't tell me what I'm doing well. I know what I'm doing well. You just tell me what I need to do and how can I improve. So it was all kind of the negative feedback, which probably suited my personality, to be fair. And I had Mark Williams for a large chunk of our my career, both as a player and as a coach. So he was my reserves coach at Essendon for 2 of the 3 years I was there. He then left to go to Port Adelaide. So Chocco tells it, which I'm pretty sure is accurate. He said, "Give me one pick." And they picked me, or he picked me. He was an assistant coach at Port Adelaide for the first 2 years I was there, but senior coach for the next 8. And then I did my knee in my last game, and a month after that, he's hired me as a backline coach. So I worked with him for another 4 years. Wow. And so he's been the most influential person over my career, and he was very much a teacher, positive, but certainly very honest and very demanding. And I think that was probably, like, I find myself doing stuff not like now that I think, geez, I've turned into Choco. And so that's probably shaped who I've become as a coach, and there's still work to do, obviously, but the awareness of who I need to be in the right moment is probably the biggest development.
Yeah. What did you learn from Chocco? What was your biggest learnings from him as a senior coach and as a leader? But also give us one of your favourite stories as well.
I love Chocco's honesty. He was direct. There was absolutely no bullshit. I think the way that he wanted to make everyone better, his teaching, the detail he went into with even the fundamentals around technique and making them, like, you got to value the details, and you got to have really strong attention to the details, and he was massive on that. And so that's one of the lessons that I've learnt of him. There's been a bunch, but yeah, he sometimes he was honest to the point where he was brutal. So going back to 2002, 2003, Port Adelaide, we finished on top of the ladder. Even in 2001, we finished third on the ladder, and went out in straight sets in the finals. 2002, we're the best team in the home and away season. We finish on top of the ladder. We lose the first final. We win the next. We then lose the prelim up at Brisbane. The next year, exactly the same thing. You could have, reeled the season out identical. Finished on top of the ladder. Lost the first final. Then beat Essendon again, and then lost to Collingwood at the G. Anyway, after that final loss, he'd had enough, and so there's a meeting out in front of the group where I basically was told that I cost us a premiership, And not basically, he did say, and Kingsley, you cost us a premiership. And to a degree, he was right. You know, I was a little bit unprofessional. I wasn't valuing the details. And so that was a pretty big hit up in front of the group. But I didn't necessarily learnt my lesson straight away, because that was the end of 2002. At the end of 2003, he called me into his office and said, "You're playing a kilo overweight, I'm getting rid of you." And I was like, geez, whew, okay, I didn't expect that. I thought I was a part of the team and going okay, but he basically got rid of me and delisted me. They didn't actually delist me, but he said whether it was by design or whether he just had enough, I'm not quite sure. But the reality is, I got to work. I started getting myself fit. My best mate, Brendan Lade, said, "We're going over to Kangaroo Island to a fat farm." So we went over there and spent a week over there not eating, which was fun. And then came back in, and I've changed my mind. And then 04 was the next year, and obviously we were able to reach that pinnacle of winning that premiership that year. So I was very fortunate, but it was on the back of some brutal truth, some real honesty, and I don't typically deliver it to my players in such honest fashion, but the lesson sticks with me.
Far out. So many questions about that, but I want to get back to the brutal truths, because I think there's some really important stuff there to go through. Whether it was in design or it wasn't, it obviously had a massive effect on you. Yep. But to go back to the part where you said that you lost the premiership for Port, like how did that take place? What was the story?
So I fancied myself as a little bit of a home renovator and landscaper. And so I'd been paving my backyard, and so I'd been ripping up bricks, laying bricks. Anyway, this is about round 17. I'd been doing it for a couple of weeks, and I did my hamstring, a pretty bad one. I missed 5 weeks.
Whilst gardening?
No, playing.
Yeah.
So I was doing it during the week, and then I'd rock up on the game day, and I did my hamstring. So early second quarter, ripped it, missed the next 5 weeks, and it disrupted our season a little bit. We still finished on top, but maybe it disrupted our season anyway. He, I came back in for the finals, was okay, but we lost. And so, I cost us a premiership. And, that still sticks with me. My teammates back then will still say that to me. Not, joking, but that's the reality. Now, the relationship between me and Chocco was such that he knew he could be brutally honest, and he could say, and I'd respond. And so that's the beauty about having relationships with people, is you know what you can say to them to make them respond. And that was his way of trying to get me to respond. And so it worked eventually.
It's amazing. How do you, I suppose it's shaped a lot of your coaching and everything really in your life. How do you take that on to players now? I know it's a little bit different in the world. Do you think we've nearly lost the art of having those brutal truths? And
oh, no. It's obviously about delivery.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you only do it because you want the best for the person and the club and the team. And so, that's the motivation behind it. So long as you can identify that and make that really clear, then it's not an issue at all. And then it becomes about delivery, timing, solutions. Do you attach solutions and provide help? Of course you do. And so, but you've got to be honest with people, I think. There's no point sugarcoating stuff. I mean, players want to know why they're in the team or why they're not, why they're playing really well or why they're not. And my job is to draw their attention to why or why not, and then help them as much as I possibly can to either stay in that form, if you want to call it that, or find it.
Is it really? I think we talk about the great players a lot. We talk about Josh Kelly and Toby Green, all these guys. But I think there's a really chatting to you today. I'm putting myself in my own shoes and thinking, how good would this be in the hindsight of having conversations with coaches and honest feedback? How do you navigate conversations with players that aren't maybe in your best 22?
Yep.
And you look at someone, for example, that's developed so well over, I know he's left the club now, but James Peatling, for example, where Pete's turned into an incredible player, and he always had that potential, but it's up to him to find out and seek that feedback from the coach. Do you seek those relationships and have those conversations with players, or does it have to be driven by the player to come to you?
No. So what I'll do, and this is one of Chocco's great things, is he would get all the players in individually.
Yeah.
And so you can't go through 44 players a week, obviously, that there'll be no time to do anything else. But if you can chunk it and bring certain players through, whether it's your best player or player 44, they have to have contact with the senior coach. And Chocco was really good at this, and this is something that I now do, is I'll schedule 11 players a week to come and spend some time with me to ensure that I'm getting across everyone. And then there's, of course, the follow-ups and, your touch points across every player, in that week, whether it's a 30-second discussion or a 10-minute. But, scheduled catch-ups with players. They come in, they might watch Vision, we might just sit down and talk about life. But at least every player is getting that touch point where we can they know what I think and how I'm going to help, irrespective of whether it's Toby who needs a little bit, or James Peatling, who at one point in his career needed a lot. And he was still finding his place, working on different things that were going to make him a better player. How do I find my way into the team, because I'm not currently in the team? And then my job is to try and help him as much as possible, whether that's fixing his play. So in the current position, let's call him he was started as a half forward for us, but maybe I can find him another position that he could be more beneficial to us, and he ends up playing as a midfielder. And I think that's what Adelaide's plans are for him. So, I mean, disappointed he left, of course, because we pour a fair bit of work in. He's a Western Sydney boy, and so there's that whole academy piece and Western Sydney where we need to grow the game, and we need local kids winning as best as we possibly can to be able to do that effectively, I think. But also, we've helped him get paid a fair bit too. So, disappointed to see him leave, but glad that, he's getting paid really well and he's able to set up his life now.
Yeah, I couldn't be more wrapped for Pete. Obviously, I would have loved him to stay at the Giants, but seeing him when he was a academy player, and then came on to play NEFL for 3 years, travelled with all the boys, and then to see what he's been able to do has been fascinating. Who would you say, through even just your coaching career, not just at the Giants, but even through Richmond, St Kilda, has been a player that you've really loved working on, that a relationship like that you've seen going, fuck, I love this relationship. I can take this player with their help to the next level.
Oh, it's always with their help.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't
of course
do it if they don't help themselves.
Yeah.
And our players work with a bunch of coaches too. So there's more than just me. I've got 7 coaches who are divvied up working with different players. So it's always a team aspect to coaching a player. Look, I would say all our boys at the Giants are great to work with. Pinpointing one, I mean, in the past, Richmond had a lot of guys who were, wonderful to work with, whether it was Nick Vlosten or Nathan Broad, Jaden Short. Brandon Ellis was one who probably, when I got to Richmond, wasn't in the team or had sort of been in the team, a premiership player at that point, played in 17 and was a really good player, but had kind of found his way out of favour. And so, he was eager and he really embraced being coached. Ended up finding his way back into the 19 premiership team as the wing. So, I mean, they're all really good. They all want what's best for themselves and the team. They're all really coachable. I'll tell our players all the time they're really coachable because ultimately they listen and try and, they just do their best to try and implement what we're talking about. And that's all I can ask for, attitude and effort.
Love it. It's funny as well, the point I was going to earlier, because obviously you played with Port in the inaugural Port team. You're now coaching the Giants, which is somewhat of a the youngest team in the AFL. But I was looking through some of your old teammates at Port Adelaide, and Tom Harley. I know he didn't play in the grand final, but to see sort of him in his first couple of years and then go over to Geelong, there was Stewie Dew and Damien Hardwick as well.
Yep.
Anyone else sort of stand out to you? But I'd love to get a piece on what your memories of Tom Harley and Dimmer and those guys were early days.
Yeah, Tom was a local Norwood boy. He, I must say, we probably didn't spend a lot of time together in that setting. I think he was there for 2 years. He might have. I think he played one game.
One game, no
kicked a
touches.
goal,
Oh.
kicked a goal, but 0 kicks. Incredible, isn't it? How does that happen? That was the stat line. I'm almost certain that's the stat line. He kicked a goal, but he didn't have any kicks because he toe poked it off the goal line, and so they didn't count it as a kick. But he obviously kicked the goal. One game, one goal, no possessions. So, but you could see. Like he was, I mean, you probably couldn't see that he'd turn into the premiership captain at Geelong, and memories of him back then was he was a really smart guy. Really, he felt to me like he was one of those hybrid backs who could catch it, but was also pretty good at ground level and quite mobile. But you'd never pick that he's going to go on to do what he did. He had a wonderful career, which continues in football. Obviously, as Sydney's CEO, Dewey, you could always see he was going to be pretty special in whatever he did. He was incredibly talented at whatever he did. See the game really well. Great personality. That was always on the cards. He was impressive as a 17-year-old boy at Port in those early years. Dimmer come across. So I played with Dimmer at Essendon in the reserves. He was playing mainly seniors. He still jokes to this day that I used to carry his bags for him at Essendon. So, and he might not have been too far off the truth, but so we knew each other from Essendon, playing reserves together. This is 94, 95, 96. And then, 2002, he ends up, to end of 2001 perhaps, coming over. And Chocco loved him. Everyone loved him as a player because of the way that he played. He was a wonderful player, but hard and tough, and exactly what we needed at that point in time. And so for him to come across back to Port Adelaide was great. We became really good friends and still are to this day. I obviously worked for him at Richmond for 4 years, and that was a wonderful time in my coaching career. I absolutely loved it. Learnt heaps off him.
I can imagine. And also, I've just thought of as well, Primus. There's 4 players that have gone on to senior coach, which is pretty big. Like it's funny now. I think about fast forwarding, I suppose, because I'm on the back end and looking at players that I've come through with, and I think like who could be a senior coach? Like you don't realise how many might actually transition through that.
Yeah, well, I think if you look at that period of time, if you compared both us and Brisbane, who were kind of battling it out a fair bit throughout that early 2000s period, the amount of assistant coaches that came out of both groups is extraordinary. Brisbane obviously had a heap of senior coaches themselves in both the Scott boys and Fly and Lepper. But they had a heap of assistant coaches as well, as did we. And I think that's probably what made us, or part of the reason why we were really good teams throughout that period. You look at the Geelong teams, all successful, and a bunch of them decided to go on and become either assistant coaches or senior coaches. So it's pretty impressive teams to have that many coaches, but it probably explains a little bit as to why we were successful.
Before we get into your journey of the senior coaching, we've got these to be frank cards that I want to get to too, but I also found one other thing that was quite interesting online was you are actually not only a winner of a Best and Fairest and a premiership, you're also a winner of Australia's Brainiest footballer in 2006.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it still sits on the mantelpiece. So I'm so proud.
So what was was this a show?
It was like a game show.
Yeah.
It was like a game show where they were just...
You meet Nathan Buckley?
No, Bucks wasn't in it. I don't think I would have won if Bucks was in it. No, there was just a bunch of... I think it was something that... I can't remember who it was. Channel 10 perhaps put something together as a bit of a all code, cross code type of competition. I'm not sure anyone was really treating it too seriously, but I mean the best thing that came out of that was so you had to play for a charity.
Yes.
And so in winning, I actually was able to get I think ended up being about $20,000 for the McGuinness McDermott Foundation at the time, which was South Australian that Chris McDermott and Tony McGuinness ran. And Tony was working at the footy club at the time, so it was an easy one to choose, and he was doing a great job over there with the kids with cancer, and so I was able to get $20,000 for him to actually help out. So that was nice.
That's huge. Do you think yourself a bit of a brainiac? Intelligent, like
not really.
Yeah.
No. My daughter loves going to trivia nights at the pubs and all that.
Yeah.
And so I've been a couple of times, and there's a few niche areas that I'm okay at. But
What's your nichest? Like, are you a geography man?
Geography, I'd like to say I'm reasonably good at geography. That would be probably one. There's a few that I'm not, though. There's actually plenty that I'm not.
Might have to find some geography ones later we can go through. All right, to be frank, 3 questions here, conversation starters. You might be able to use these with the boys, thanks to Carly. This one's off the top. Is what's the best thing that has happened to you in the last week?
In the last week? So, a bit different in Sydney to Melbourne in that you can get your licence as a P player to a 17-year-old up there, which I didn't realise until I got up there. Anyway, my son turned 17 at the start of the year, and he's had a couple of attempts at his driver's licence, getting his Ps, and hasn't quite succeeded. But earlier on this week, he managed to pass, and so he's now free. He's got his licence. He can start driving around, and now I don't have to take him to footy training, and it frees up a little bit of my time to do other things, which is nice. So yeah, he was pumped. Very, very nervous. Very nervous. I can't remember, or I can vaguely remember getting my driver's licence at 18. But yes, he was extremely nervous.
One of the best feelings in the world. I still remember this day when I got my driver's licence. I got it on my birthday, 18th birthday. I had it booked in. Didn't tell anyone just in case. But I got it. And I remember that first drive when you're just driving on the road by yourself and you're just like, how is this legal? Like, what am I doing? Yeah. It's one of the most liberating feelings in the world. So I'm sure he's absolutely pumped. What's he driving at the moment? He's got a nice whip.
He's got a little Volkswagen Golf, which is
nice.
It's a really nice car. So
good one for Sydney.
He's done well. Around. Yeah, he's done well.
Good on him. How many kids have you got? 2?
I've got 3.
3. So one boy.
Got 2 boys.
2 boys.
Younger, 17, 14-year-old boy, and I've got a 20-year-old daughter.
Yeah, beautiful.
She's still living in Melbourne on campus. I'm doing a research science, immunology, biomedicine degree, whatever it is, and she's loving it. So
good on her. Yeah. Huge. Did she get that from you or mum?
Probably her mum.
Yeah. When are you happiest in life?
There's a lot of things that make me happy. I like watching my kids do stuff that they really enjoy doing, whether it's playing footy or whether it's going for a walk or playing computer games. That makes me happy. So the family piece. We've already spoken about music. That typically, music's about mood, isn't it? It shifts your mood, and I really enjoy listening to music. I love the NFL.
Yeah. Who do you support?
I'm going to go with Buffalo.
Yep.
Was fortunate enough to get there 5 years ago. Spent some time in Buffalo, so that was a brilliant experience. -5 degrees during the game, so it was a little bit different, but not quite as bad as the -16 that I went to a Denver game in. But
you love the game, but love the actual sport behind it as well, like the coaching philosophies, all that sort of stuff. Well,
I love the detail.
The detail.
I love the athleticism of the guys. They're unbelievable, the players. And then I love the fantasy aspect of it too.
Yeah.
Because we compete.
Are you in a league? You're in a fantasy league?
Yeah, I'm in a couple. Yeah. And so I compete with a few of these boys, including Dimmer.
Yeah.
Who and that was really big at Richmond, particularly.
With the coaches?
The coaches and staff. And so now we've scattered all over different clubs, but we still compete. And that's the thing you miss about when you finish playing, and I'm sure you would vouch for this. You don't get that opportunity to compete anymore. And that's almost the biggest hole that you need to fill. It certainly was in my case anyway. And that's why I think some players, when they retire, can really struggle post-football career, is because they don't get the opportunity to compete anymore and satisfy that need. And so, as strange as it may sound, playing fantasy against other guys is that fills that need to compete.
Compete 100%, and I'd say, like, for me personally, even more important was the comfort zone piece. Like, I think when you're in an elite sport environment, you're constantly getting pushed out of your comfort zone and you don't have to initiate it. And when you leave, like all the things that you thought you couldn't wait to not ever do again are the things that you crave the most.
I agree.
And, you've actually got to initiate those things, and it takes time to actually learn that that's what you miss. So,
it's funny you mentioned that because I did my knee in my last game and I said to myself, I'm never going for a run again, ever. I reckon it took maybe 3 months before I was allowed to run again after the knee, and I went for a run.
And then you do a marathon or something?
No, I haven't quite got to
you
that.
don't done
I
that
haven't
yet?
quite
Okay.
got to that. I actually trained with Matty Primus when he was running the New York Marathon.
Yeah.
So we would go on, a lot of lengthy runs, and he was a really good runner, Matty. So that was challenging for me, but it was good fun. So, yeah, those days are well and truly behind me, though.
Toby was actually telling me that you take up nearly the most time on the physio beds with all your soft tissue injuries at the moment.
Well, I have had a few soft tissue injuries, but I'm never on the physio bed.
What's sort of popping off? It wouldn't be those shoulders or biceps, surely.
No, the shoulder's not great, but I did a calf. I did a calf about 3 weeks ago.
On the track or just?
No, I was doing a
gardening,
session. No, I wasn't doing that. I was doing a session and I was on the skipping rope, and it just started to tighten up a bit.
Yeah.
And so, I did a calf last year, mid last year. I did a really bad hamstring.
Yeah.
I was I love to have fun, and again the compete is probably an element of that, but. We play this game at the Giants, soccer tennis.
It's the best game in the
Well, it's so fun. And I've watched them play, but I don't often play anyway. I thought, I'm going to join in this. And I'm going to start throwing a few barbs around to make it a bit more competitive. And anyway, I tried to chase down this ball. Witters headed this ball into the corner and it got past me, and I've tried to chase it down and I've tried to flick it back over my head because you're in pairs.
Yeah.
So I've tried to flick it back over my head to my partner, so he could then get it back over the net. In doing so, I've ripped the hamstring as bad as I've ever done it, and I've done a few hamstrings. And so there's 3 muscles of the hamstring, and I've torn 2 of them, and the third one was where I had my graft from my knee reconstruction, and that hadn't taken back, so I couldn't even bend my leg up, do a leg curl. It was that bad, and that lasted for about. Well, I did have to go and have a scan on that just to ensure that it wasn't tendon.
Off the bone.
Yeah. But yeah, that wasn't a great one. It took me about 8 weeks to get.
Is this middle of the year?
That was the middle of the year.
So
yeah.
when you're coaching, walking up the stairs midweek,
Well, I was on the bench for the most part.
Yeah.
I mean, there was one time where I was talking to one of the players and I was late getting off the ground, and so I had to sort of jog off the ground, and that wasn't great because it aggravated again.
Hamstrings are so underrated. How painful they are if you do a good one.
Yeah. This was a pretty bad one. And the other problem is I'm probably not the most diligent rehabber either, so it took a little longer than what it should have. But anyway, all
Plenty
good
of
now.
ice.
All's well that ends well.
Last one. What is the most impactful advice you've ever received?
When I was a kid, I remember mum always telling me you meet the same people on the way up as you do on the way down. So don't be a dickhead, essentially. So I probably interpreted that as be humble, treat everyone the same, find time to talk to everyone. And so I try and do that.
It's great advice. Great advice. I think even like in my own world now, thinking about it, you definitely see periods in your life where you're killing it or you're not killing it, and you see how the people can treat you at either times. Yeah,
and you shouldn't let your emotions dictate your effort either. And so that is at times, difficult if it's not going well for you, or, but yeah, it's something that I've tried to be good at.
Well, especially in the position you're in now, being the senior coach, I think, and I don't think this would be news to you, but from being maybe an assistant coach to then being the head honcho, you might have people, you don't want to surround yourself with yes men or yes women.
No.
And I suppose maybe that can soften your resolve sometimes if you do believe into that sort of stuff, but that advice would probably form a pretty good resolve to not have that.
Yeah, you're right. You want people to challenge you, absolutely. And so that what makes a healthy coaching team. And as I've said, we've got 7 assistant coaches, but we've also got another 3 or 4 part-time coaches who have the same relationship and are able to offer advice or challenge decisions or suggestions. So I think we do that pretty well.
Jeremy Laidler. I haven't even spoke to Jez about this, but do you think that he would be a senior coach? Is that in his aspirations?
I think it is in his aspirations. I think he has the capacity to be.
He's a mean man on the field back in the day.
Was he? Yeah. So you're talking your Carlton days?
Well, I played with him at Carlton, but even when he was at the Swans, and because I don't think he'd mind me saying this, probably wasn't the most talented, but just he had a bit of grunt in him.
Slow as a wet week is what I've heard.
Yeah. Terrible kid. I actually don't know how he played. I actually don't know how he played. But.
Well, I compare him. He's a 35-year-old coach. He coaches our offense and our forwards now. And he's been with us since we first got up there. We were lucky enough to get him across from the Swans. I guess I was 4 years into my coaching career at the same age, and I look at him and I compare him to me, and I think, geez, he does a lot of things much better than what I was doing at the same age. And his relationship with his players, his empathy, his ability to communicate to them, I think is first class. And so that obviously pleases me for the now, but it's encouraging for what the future might hold for him. Yeah.
Let's get into your story of coaching. So obviously, as we mentioned, St Kilda. So you were at Port as well for a little bit.
I was at Port for 4 years. Yeah. So I did my knee in my last game, end of 06, just after winning that Brainiest footballer.
It was all downhill from there.
Yeah. So I did my knee reconstruction. A month after I did my knee, Chocco employed me as the backline coach. Yep. And throughout the year it was quite funny in that I still wanted to play, and I wanted to play the following year. But I had a terrible run with injury. In the pre-season I did my shoulder, and then I had a adductor injury, and I did a hamstring on my second game back. Then I had an epidural in my back because my calf pain was... and then in my last game I did my knee. I played 5 games in total that year. And throughout the year, Choco, at the start of the year, maybe do the level 2 coaching course, and then he'd book me in for the level 3 coaching course at the end of the season. I'm going, oh, well, hang on, I want to coach. I want to play, sorry. And he's going, yeah, no worries. Anyway, he's obviously seen something that I didn't see myself at the time. So I then spent the next 4 years coaching the backs under him. He got sacked midway through that year, and then we'd had 2 kids in Adelaide, and Nadine, my wife, was pregnant with Rafi, our youngest. And she goes, all our family's back in Melbourne, it's time to go back. So we went back, and I was then at St Kilda. So I worked under Ross for a year, and then he left for Freo. Scotty Waters come in for a couple of years, which I enjoyed, and then Alan Richardson for the remaining 5 years. So I was at 8 years total at Saints, and then went to Richmond for 4 years under Dimmer. Yeah.
The Saints, we often talk about Richmond, and obviously what happened there was amazing, but you often learn a lot more from what probably doesn't go right. Like, was there a lot of learnings from the Saints period?
Absolutely, there was. Yeah. There was a lot of really good stuff, and there was some stuff that we didn't quite get right. Yeah. But the experiences, I think, are incredibly valuable around not winning, finishing on the bottom. How to motivate players when they're not winning and not feeling great about themselves. How do you make small incremental improvements to try and get to where you need to get to? Should you introduce a bunch of new players together, or should you drip feed these new players in to try and get better and become more experienced, but whilst being surrounded by, some of the more experienced guys? So there was a lot of lessons at St Kilda that we had to go through because we were finishing on the bottom of the ladder for a year or two. And then we slowly started to build our way up. But as we know, that's not always linear. So you find bumps in the road that you've got to learn from. Quite often when coaches get the job, they're taking over a team that hasn't won. There's a reason why. But a lot of times the coaches who get hired haven't actually experienced losing. And so to me, I found it incredibly valuable, that period, to ultimately being able to, how do you deal with when it's happening? And it happens to everyone, unless you maybe Geelong or Sydney, which doesn't seem to happen to those guys, and we're aspiring to be that at the Giants now. But, I mean, I took over the Giants because we finished fourth last or something. And so you're kind of expecting a little bit of that to go on. How are we going to develop our players? Who are we going to introduce? How are we going to make it better? yeah, so I thought those lessons at St Kilda were brilliant for me.
Huge. You applied for a few senior position jobs before you got the one at the Giants. So was it Carlton?
Carlton Collingwood the year before.
Carlton Collingwood.
So Fly got that, and Vossi got the Carlton job, obviously. There'd been a few over the. It was interesting actually. The first one I went for was when Richo got the St Kilda job, and Chris Pelkin, who was the footy manager at the time, and I knew Chris for a long period of time. He worked at Port Adelaide actually as a footy manager for a little while. He's a wonderful football person, someone I respect. He actually encouraged me to apply for it. He said, "I think it really worthwhile for you to go through this process." Now he would have done that, and I haven't spoken to Chris about that, but he would have done that knowing that I wasn't ready to be a senior coach. But the experience would actually help me enormously, and it did. And so there was that one, and then I went for Adelaide a few years later. And so there's been a few over the journey, but you kind of learn your lessons along the way and make slight changes to what you believe and how you present and all that sort of stuff, and eventually it works. Hopefully.
What was that? What was that process like? How did it change for you? What did you gain confidence in? What did you learn from?
I think just knowing what the big rocks are, what you need to talk about, what's important, how to talk about it, what your presentation looks like. Is it 100 pages long or is it 5 pages long? Do you need to tell the panel everything you possibly know in that 2-hour interview, 3-hour interview, whatever it ends up being? Or is there some implied stuff? Is can you be a little bit generic on some topics and then dig a little bit deeper into others? And so you kind of learn how to present better. What are the most important things? So I felt that was the biggest improvement. My philosophy changed slightly around how to play, but not significantly. But yeah, being able to present better was the most important thing.
When you take over the Giants job as well, I put my hand up. I think that it was, you finished third last, Leon leaves. I think a lot of people in the AFL world thought, okay, Giants are going to bottom out here and rebuild, or they're going through a period now. They've had their time. They've lost what it is. What was your messaging to somewhat be able to turn that around? Because I feel like even internally some players thought that was going to happen.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's hard to get out of that when you're in it. And so a fresh voice, all our coaching group changed. There was only one person who remained, Craig Jennings, and he'd only been there for 12 months or a little less than. And so I think being able to introduce a whole new coaching group was really important. That provided a little bit of energy to our playing group. New voices had to work to now build relationships with these guys. The way that we played was significantly different to the way that they had played. And so being able to teach that, train it, make a shift on a couple of things in both training and the game was, I think, hugely impactful. And so that all sort of squished together made it a really good formula to improve really quickly. Plus, you can't win without good players. And obviously we've got really good players, a lot of them. And they're not the finished product, but they're still pretty good players. And so you've got to have that to be able to win consistently.
We spoke about hard conversations before, and I can imagine the one around leadership at the Giants would have been a tough conversation. You've got Cogs and Chook.
Cogs, Chook, Toby were all captains.
We're all captains.
Yeah.
Which I am a really big fan of standalone captains as well. I'm not sure your opinions of it, but
how evident, aren't they?
Yeah.
we chose one.
Yeah. How challenging was that for a young group? And I suppose why? What do you love about Toby being your captain?
So that was a really interesting period, and made so much easier by quality people. Two of the best people you'd ever meet in football as players, Stephen Cornelio, Josh Kelly, and the way that they dealt with what would have been probably a bit of disappointment, saying, hey, I'm going with one captain. It's not you two boys. Toby's going to be the sole captain. and their response in the moment was, and I had them both together, telling them what the plan was. And this had unfolded across the course of the pre-season. This wasn't me just walking in day one and going, hey, Toby's a captain, you guys aren't. This was a 2 or 3 month body of work around, well, who has influence, how do they play? And so those boys' response to, yep, no problems, Toby will be a great captain, we'll do everything we possibly can to support him. And you listen to that as a coach and you go, oh, how easy is this? There was no dissent, there was no argument, there was no complaint, there was no why aren't I captain? It was no problems, I accept the decision, we'll support and help him as best as we possibly can.
I think, and I'm interested in your perspective on this, and this isn't a knock at anyone at the Giants whatsoever, because I love the place, but what I think crept in a little bit there was this this notion of we can't upset any of the players because if we upset the big dogs, they'll just leave.
Yeah.
And, to an extent that might have been true back in the day, but I think what we're talking about before about honest conversations, if you please everyone, you please no one.
Yeah.
And you have to get to a point where these guys, like Cogs and Josh, they actually would rather just be told what's happening and be a part of a team versus everyone trying to get pleased and be...
Yeah, well, it's a difficult situation, isn't it? And I can't speak for the past, obviously, but it's not something that we can do. I mean, we've got to try and make our team as best as we possibly can, and if that means you break a couple of hearts along the way or they're not playing in the position that they want to play or whatever the case may be, well, so be it. And if we lose players, well, we lose players, and that's unfortunate. We don't want to lose players, but it happens, particularly in this day and age, and it's probably going to become even more prevalent. But we'll just replace, and we'll give other guys opportunities. And losing players sometimes can actually make you get better, because the guys from underneath who weren't potentially playing can show what they can do. Or you might shift, like Brisbane did last year. You might shift positions to provide cover, and all of a sudden you find an All-Australian halfback that you didn't know you had in Dane Zorko, who was a wonderful player, but never at halfback. And all of a sudden, maybe he was the catalyst to them winning. Things like that. So can't be afraid to lose players in our position. That's really important. You pick the team and you play the team that's going to best suit the team, not the individual. And we stress that incredibly. We're very role-based team within a system, and we continually push that. And I think there's a great acceptance of, firstly, those star players that, yep, no worries, I don't need to do anything special, I just need to do my job. And as soon as those guys accept it, then it becomes easier for everyone else too.
How do you, as a senior coach, look after so many people in a football club, not just players, but administration staff, supporters, stakeholders? There's a lot of people that you have to deal with as a senior coach.
Yeah.
But then also look after your own mental health.
Well, that's probably the biggest challenge, to be fair, around being an assistant coach for a long period of time, 16 years, where you don't really have to manage a lot of people, or people aren't coming to you with ideas or opinions or problems necessarily that you have to then try and help. So you always have time for yourself as an assistant coach. As a senior coach, you can perhaps bypass that to then try and address everyone else's issues or problems or ideas. You hear it all, and so that's the difficulty. Being really well organised is really important, I find. Knowing when you've got your own time, when you've got others' times, I think helps me. And then it's just about listening, isn't it? And trying as best as you possibly can. You don't always have the answers. You can't always help, but you can certainly listen. And I think that obviously is a really important piece to it. 44 players, a bunch of coaches, analytics, high performance, medical, welfare. The footy departments these days are pretty significant. And everyone's, needs time, first and foremost. But there are a lot of suggestions, there are a lot of ideas, and many of them are good, but you've got to find the time to be able to really listen to them and then try and help.
You have to be a bit of a funnel sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And you're relying on other people to lessen the load on that aspect too. So you need good people around you. and that's what we have at the Giants. And you definitely need that.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of good people. Dylan Addison, one of those that has been probably, he'd be embarrassed even getting spoken about, but one of the best in the business when it comes to looking after people first and foremost.
Yeah. He's he's been there a long time, obviously, and so caring. Yeah, has his own family, but certainly there to support everyone and make their jobs as easy as possible. And an absolute beast in the indoor soccer field. You don't want to play against. You don't want to play against Shovel. He's too violent.
Do you know that a little quick story actually? When we were back in the days of the NEFL, which are my glory days, I love talking about. Shove used to actually have to fill in for a few games when we were short on players. Yeah. So you didn't really experience the NEFL because you wouldn't have seen it back in the VFL, but you'd get literally top ups from like anywhere. You'd never met them. They just come in on the day. So Shove, our play development manager, would play. He actually one day, and you know this man, he's a beautiful man. He ran through Nick Newman, who was at the Swans at that stage, cleaned him up, absolutely cleaned him up. And I think he got 4 weeks.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll have to remind him of that.
Yeah, just remind him of that because he thinks he's Mr. Nice Guy.
Yeah,
but
he is. He's one of these mild men. You know what he's like? A bit like Hardwick.
Yeah.
Mild-mannered, nice guy off the field. As soon as he steps over the line, he becomes a lunatic.
Yeah. Yeah. No, he's a bad man. Mate, before we get into last little bit, because I know you've been extremely generous with your time, what obviously the goals this year are pretty obvious. It seems extremely exciting. What's among us has made a really good start. How do you prep for a long season, and where do you hope? I suppose how do you get to the end of the year and be in good form and momentum at the same time?
Well, I think you design your program as such that you want to be and need to be playing your best footy at the end of the year. I think you've got to do enough to make the finals, absolutely. Yep. And so you have to play well across the year, but you aspire to be playing your best footy. And typically the team that's playing the best footy wins it. And we've seen that year after year after year. But the way you design your program, the way you educate your players, the way you manage your players throughout the season, I think is really important. There's obviously a fair bit of luck around it. You need the luck in your favour, injuries, all that sort of stuff. Plays a massive role. And as we know, the competition right now, I think last year we were, I'm not going to be accurate on this maybe, but might have been 2 games away from finishing 13th. And we had a bunch of games where we were down at quarter time or 3/4 time that we came back to win. And so you kind of go, well, you lose 2 of those games and we go from 4th to 13th potentially, whatever the ladder position was, and miss the finals. And now no one's talking about us as being the team that may be able to compete. And so there's such a fine line in this game, and you can't take that for granted, and you've got to have things go right. Injuries, as I've said, bit of luck. You've got to be playing well at the right times. And so there are a significant amount of challenges across this season, and we'll have bumps, but it's the way you manage and deal with them that allows you to then respond and get back in the fight. Or, geez, you've missed your opportunity in a 4-week block of the season, and these games that you lose that you expect to win, or there are 8-point games in the old terms, they're so important, irrespective of where they are across the course of the season.
Oh, we look at what happened with Carlton Richmond the other night. Like, anything can happen, especially in the last couple of years of this season. It's so close. Yeah,
and so that's probably a reflection of the draft and all that's working. And last season was probably the most exciting season we've had, certainly that I can remember. So it's great for the competition, but it just provides that level of uncertainty with each club that you're never quite sure where you can finish. You're always hopeful. You aspire to be winning a premiership, but very rarely happens.
Give us top 3, not top 3, just give us a random 3 players this year that you're really excited to have an impact at the club. You think that, we might not be the stars that we know of.
Okay. Just got to go through the list.
Yeah.
I think Darcy Jones is one that has the capacity to really elevate his game quickly. He would be one that I would expect could do great things. Finn Callaghan. Yeah. I mean, we saw that in the first game of the season. I think he's going to be a superstar.
It must mean a lot as a coach in a football club for him to turn down what seemed to be quite a large offer.
Absolutely, yeah. It's reinforcement around the direction we're heading. It's wonderful for our players to know that he's fully invested at the start of the season. And so that gives them an enormous amount of confidence and a bit of comfort. So that's I think it's really important.
Do you know what the real reason for him staying was?
What?
Well, he doesn't like wearing T-shirts and he lives in North Bondi. And every time I've been in Sydney, I just see him walking up and down the beach with no top on.
Yep.
And I just don't think that that's happening in Seaford. So...
No, probably not. Probably not. I'm sure it played a significant role. Can you make sure he wears shoes down the beach?
Yeah, okay.
He rocked up to training early last year with a cut in his foot because he was just walking around with bare feet.
He's just budgies, no top, no shoes.
If I look like that, I probably would be doing that too, to be fair. But Connor Iden.
Yep.
Let's go with Connor.
Yep.
I think he's a competitive beast. He'd be so hard to play on as an opposition forward, I would imagine. So he would be one that I would include in that three.
We've got to give Caruso some credit as well. He's an avid listener, and he'd be upset if we didn't bring him up. But
yes.
in all seriousness, what he's done in the draft over the last few years has been pretty incredible. And even finding, Connor Iden at pick 60, some of these players that have come through with quite low picks have turned into really important players.
Yeah. Well, like I said before, you can't win consistently without good players. And what Adrian has been, and we don't trade them in really. I mean, we've traded in Jesse, Toby Bedford and Jake Stringer recently. Other than that, we're kind of drafting. And so Adrian plays a significantly important role in our club. And as you said, he's done a wonderful job nailing the high picks, but also making sure that we find those pick 60s who turn into really good players and really strong leaders for our club. I've been wrapped with him and Emma Quayle and Tom Nixon as part of that team. I think they do a wonderful job for us. Yeah,
they do. Kingers, you've been a star, mate. To finish up, we've got some geography questions to go.
Great, here we go. So, now I'm feeling proud, a bit like my son going through a driver's test now. I'm feeling pressure.
What is the smallest country in the world?
Vatican City.
Very good. Very good. What is the capital of Canada?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, isn't it? It's like the capital of New Zealand, but is it Ottawa?
Yep. Mon, are you giving them? Okay. Last but not least, what ocean is the largest and the deepest?
I don't know is the answer, but I'll guess the Indian.
It's the Pacific. Pacific.
Pacific.
Yeah. Now you know. Kingers, you've been a star, mate. We genuinely can't can't thank you enough for your time. And really excited to see what happens this year. But congratulations on everything you've achieved from your playing days to your coaching to your fatherhood. Everything seems like you're doing an incredible job, and it's an honour to have you on the show. So can't thank you enough.
Thanks, mate. Been really enjoyable.
Good stuff.